Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering One Piece, episodes 354, 355, and 356. I swear to go see him, Brook and the Cape of Promise. Food, Nami, and Shadows, Luffy's enraged counterattack, and Usopp's the strongest? Leave anything negative to him. In these episodes, well, Sanji apparently has a new power that I don't know where it came from, but alright, sure, why not? And Usopp has a power that we didn't know was a power all along. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to the One Piece crew for commissioning this episode. What's up, guys? This was another 3-episode, I want to say 3-episode episode, but you guys wanted me to cover 3 episodes today, and the first of the 3 episodes was almost only flashbacks. And sometimes, you all know, I can be kind of like, come on. But honestly, I remembered so much less of that storyline than I thought I did. I only remembered that there is this whale that they run into and that there's a dude living in there. And I had forgotten that the guy living inside the whale is like totally certain that the whale has been straight up abandoned on purpose. Like they deliberately left it and didn't come back. And I pretty much took his word on that during that episode because he acted so certain, but he doesn't say how he knows or where he got his information from. And I don't know if it's supposed to be that he had been on the crew and he wasn't one of them, I don't think. So it seems now that he was maybe just talking out of his ass. And I don't know if that was supposed to be that he's trying to tell the whale the worst possible scenario just to ease the blow so that if nobody comes back, he won't be surprised. Even though it's very clear that Laboon is, it's been 50 years and he has not given up hope yet. So I don't see why he would think just telling him, trust me, they abandoned you, they're not coming back, would work when we're going into the 6th decade of him waiting. I guess he's patient. So, let's see. Florian says, yeah, we do not have to talk too much about the flashbacks since we've been here. Yeah, that was the only thing that I was really curious about. I can't remember what the thing that Luffy keeps calling him is Flowerhead Guy, but I don't recall the character's name. And I was sort of expecting as well that he wind up being part of the story with Brook, that we were going to find out Flowerhead Guy knew Brook, or that there was some kind of connection there, but it doesn't seem like there is. It seems like those are 2 completely different encounters that Laboon has had. So, yeah, and I had forgotten also that Luffy basically just starts beating the shit out of Laboon just because he can sense, as he puts it, when somebody wants a fight, which he turns out to be right. But initially I was just what is wrong with you? Why would you do this? You're just beating up on this poor, sad whale that's all alone. But, right, the whale, I don't know, in my, memory's eye, I'm picturing there being some kind of signaling where the whale is, kind of asking, hey, you want to go play fisticuffs? You know how a whale would do. But I didn't remember that, like, it's kind of the whale just being around and Luffy just being like, oh, I know what this whale's after. He was right, as it turns out, but it feels very surprising to watch. Oh, Brian says Crocus is the Laboon guy. How did I not put together his flower guy and the name of a flower is a crocus? I don't remember that at all. Did I make that connection the first time? I do not remember. Let's see. Florian says, I think he heard a rumor that Laboon fell in battle, that the Laboon's crew fell in battle, which they kind of did. I mean, if he did, though, he doesn't say to Laboon in this flashback, hey, bud, I'm real sorry, but I heard that your whole crew was killed. He says they left him here because, like, basically pirates ain't shit. Like, he's kind of salty and snarky about it, as if these guys were having one over on Laboon and he couldn't stand to see this poor whale getting played. You know, so it's a very different energy. If he heard they were dead, that's one thing. But if you think they're dead, why would you frame it to this kid? And I'm calling the whale a kid, and I stand by that. Why would you frame it like, hey, they just don't care and left you here and they're not coming back? If, you know, one of those is something that's sort of verifiable by saying, oh yeah, we heard that they were taken out at such and such and nobody made it. But the other just being like, well, I'm pretty sure that they don't give a shit. But I don't know if, I'm like, because in the flashback, you know, they only show so much. So if he mentions hearing that they fell in battle in, like, from rumors or anything, it wasn't in the flashback. So all I know is what he says to Luffy that he has been telling Laboon. Oh, Brian says, well, I didn't know that crocus was a type of flower, so we both learned something new today. Smiley face. Yeah, it's spelled differently. It's spelled with C's instead of K's. And it's not a flower that looks anything like the flower on his head. Although I say that, and I have to remember that, like, you know, sometimes a very basic flower name will cover a really big spectrum. So it's possible that there is a crocus that looks like the one on his head. And I'm thinking of like a purple crocus that comes up in spring in, like, New England mostly. So maybe there is something in Japan that looks like the one that is on his head, and that is their crocus. But anyway, okay, so I just wanted to recap on that, because as much as I remembered Laboon and that whole thing was like, I really kind of appreciated the flashbacks here, because I genuinely did not recall. We get a little bit of, like, the thumbnail for this episode, you can see Brook as a live dude who's, like, playing a fiddle for Laboon. And I will tell you what, guys, this dude looks like so much fun. He just looks like he's having a great time. And he's just managed to, like, maintain that vibe into his post-life personality. And that is pretty impressive, because I don't feel that I would be as happy-go-lucky after experiencing the kinds of setbacks that he has. But really, what is One Piece about if not the perseverance of the human spirit? So we have all of these flashbacks, and I want to mention, every time that they do this, I get confused and think that the whole show has been like this, but I just didn't notice until now. When they do the flashbacks in this episode, it's not necessarily what they do in all of them. And I kind of think it must be because they're showing such a significant number of flashbacks that it takes up enough time that they felt like they really wanted to underscore that this is like a whole other storyline that they're reminding us of. But they shrink the screen that has the actual flashbacks down and surround it with a frame that is like first of all, the like blue water, and then even further out, the map around them. So it's like a really weird sort of frame that only comes up sometimes. I think what I said is why they do it when it's like a particularly large chunk of the episode. But I always get confused when I see it, and I'm like, is this like the way they're putting the show on Funimation? Is that because it's like the aspect ratio is off? Like, what is going on? But anyway, so yeah, the crew is still talking about like the fact that Brook, the coincidence of meeting him with them having met Laboon, and just what are the odds of that? And then we go, because Zoro thinks to himself, I wonder what that skeleton's doing right now. And we go to him fighting the, I keep forgetting his name. I know you guys told me, but the like samurai skeleton guy. And for once, he's actually kind of holding his own. He's doing pretty well. And, samurai Ryuma is he is actually kind of impressed. This is one of those things that I have a real toxic relationship with, you guys. Everybody talks like, there was a kind of trend going around a year or two ago that was like, my toxic trait is blank. And it would, you would just say some behavior that you like know is fucked up, but you still do it. And I think that one of my biggest toxic traits, especially were I like a superhero, when I'm reading or watching anything like this, I really feel gratified when the villain in the scene acknowledges that the other person is, if not a match for them, at least like above average or more than they were expecting. I think that, that reveals a deep-seated need for approval, and I acknowledge that, and that's fine, whatever. But I could not help when Ryuma was like, oh, you have gotten stronger. Be like, hey, all right, see, good for you, Brook. You've been working. Like, I really wanted to give him a pat on the back. Florian says it is not shrinked. The first episodes were in a 3-4. A 3-4 ratio. And Brian says the episodes back then were made in a 4-3 ratio. It's like the ratio usually, and I may be just wrong on this, but I want to just like take a screenshot so that I can just like show you guys in the share. But it's shrunk from every direction. Usually, if you're trying to show something that's like meant to be in the TV aspect ratio, they just put the bars on either side to get the rectangular screen down to a square. But what they've done for this, at least on Funimation, is they have put the frame around all of it so that it's like there's a square just sort of in the middle of the screen. And this is not important. Forgive me, folks who are listening and are just like, literally, who cares? But, I have like curiosity about little details like this, because sometimes it's almost never like really important, but it can be kind of interesting to find out. So because like, the area around the square that has the actual show in it is blue and also a square. And so you would think that they would just expand out the actual show to fill that space instead. But it's instead they just shrank it further down so that it's framed twice, basically. It's framed by the map imagery, and then it's framed by the water. So it's just a very weird decision that they have made, and I'm not really sure why it's like that, but it's fine. I just wanted to show you guys. So I screen shared, and now I'm done. So this Brooks fight with Ryuma, he says, you've gotten much better, but also so have I. And then Brooke winds up on his back. And I was like, come on, man. I really wanted him to pull through this and just prove something, you know? It's not, it's just to himself, not prove something to Ryuma, to be clear, because that's not what is important, even though I know that I said I was gratified, and I am. But you could see in the last fight when Brooke falls against Ryuma and has to run away, how kind of ashamed of himself he is that he wasn't able to take this dude down, especially because he was confused at the fact that he's facing technically his own consciousness. So he was not expecting to be outmatched because he didn't understand, I don't think, about the factor that the body the spirit is chosen to, the spirit's been put into has what, oh my God. Okay. He didn't understand that the body chosen for the spirit is a significant factor in the strength of the zombie. So I think that he figured he was just going to be facing somebody who had the exact same abilities as himself, regardless of the body. And I say that while acknowledging that that's what I think is going on with Ryuma being such a better swordsman than him, but I'm not positive. And you guys, this was so rough because he's fighting him. He winds up on his back, and Ryuma is mocking him about the fact that he's still trying to protect his afro. He actually guts him at one point, and I say that with the full awareness again that he has no guts, and this is a running joke, but he gets him in the stomach area, and Brooke, we get a close up of his face in that moment, and you see a couple of I think what are supposed to be tufts of hair from his afro that fall down, even though the sword was nowhere near his afro. So I think it's just meant to be symbolic of the fact that he's in trouble. But yeah, Ryuma gets him on his back and again is just really enjoying the concept of humiliating him by cutting the afro off. And mentions that it's basically the biggest thing on his whole body, so it is a target whether he likes it or not. And I thought that was kind of an interesting point, actually. But then Brooke gets up again, keeps fighting, and we have this inner monologue about what he's thinking in regard to Laboon. And he is just really feeling a lot of guilt over leaving this animal there, not coming back. And he says something about how he really tried to bring everybody back and it just didn't work out. Everybody's gone now and I have done all that I could do. And I lost my friends, my body, my shadow. I basically lost my life, even though not exactly. And when I go back and see you, if I get to, I don't even know how you're going to recognize me. And I'm like, look, I understand your concern on that, buddy, but I will say that you're pretty distinctive looking still. And honestly, that is a hell of a compliment. If I were to be reduced to just a like skeleton and my hair, I don't know how much it would just be a guarantee that a person 50 years later would see me and be like, oh yeah, but man, he has a certain look, and I am somewhat confident that he is going to be recognized by Laboon. I just feel like that's probably, you know, and if he decides to live inside Laboon, which would actually be really weird, but I wouldn't be mad about it. I think that would be a sweet ending for him, you know? It's sort of a weird thing too, like, you know, I want him to get his shadow back, of course, but if he didn't, he could probably be safe inside Laboon. It's a weird thing because, you know, and I talked about this during those episodes, there's a whole light system going on inside Laboon that doesn't make any sense but looks like daylight. So I don't actually know how that would even go. I'm assuming it's supposed to be that it's like coming in through the blowhole, so maybe it wouldn't be safe for him. But all this to say, the fight between him and Ryuma, there's a moment that was really funny where the two of them are like face to face and they both start laughing at the same time. And there's just something really eerie about the way both of them laugh so similarly, but also very, very differently. And the energy here of like this being his own spirit that's doing this and so bent on taking him down, that does have to be kind of a weird place to be, to realize that like this shadow of yourself, literally and figuratively, will be perfectly fine with killing its host, which, considering the fact that he is kind of dead already. So, question, guys, actually, now that I think about this, can Brook be killed? Like, how would that work? We see him get sorted through a couple times. Obviously does nothing. It's fine. I'm assuming, you know, we see like bits of bone go flying and whatnot, but he always just gets back up. And I am realizing that if he's fighting himself and that shadow were to win and kill him, then that swordsman would be deactivated. And I'm assuming that Moria just doesn't care. But I had thought that this guy was kind of important to him. Like, he's a really good fighter, unusually good, considering the fucking incompetent zombies that we have seen so far. So I would have thought that fighting the Shadow's owner wouldn't be on the list of like to-dos, because then you're going to potentially rob yourself of a pretty key fighter, I thought. But maybe I'm just overestimating this guy's importance. And of course I understand too that like the zombie himself is forced to do what he's told to do. So it's not like he has the logic to stop and be like, wait, if I do this, I'm destroying myself. Like, that's not how it works. They do what they're told, so far as we've seen. So I'm not saying anything about him, but I'm just sort of wondering why, like, whose orders is he under at this point? Has he been told to take Brook out? Or is this just an automatic self-defense that's sort of built in because Brook attacked him? I don't know. But anyway, we have this like really intense moment where he is promising, I don't care what I have to do, but I am definitely coming back for you. And again, bone is flying, and it is a real kind of I'm gonna struggle back to my feet and keep fighting until I, like Boromir, am kneeling helpless before you, and you come directly up to me and draw a bow to shoot me in the head. But anyway, we find out here, you guys, I was not prepared for this at all, that everybody is completely on board with Laboon. Well, actually, I say Usopp said Laboon specifically as well, so I guess that would be interesting. But everybody is completely on board with Brook joining the crew. And I know that this was mentioned before, but I had forgotten. Luffy had said that they needed musicians, or that he wanted one. And Brook playing the fiddle, like, this is exactly what Luffy had been looking for from almost the very beginning, if I remember correctly. So I forgot about how neatly Brook fits into that little slot, but I also was surprised that everybody else at this point, after hearing this story about Laboon, and of course Frankie starts crying, everybody has decided that they're going to completely set aside their own, like, fears and hang-ups about what Brook is and go with it and let him join the crew. And if he really does, I'm going to be pretty stoked, you guys, because I mean, I was so sure that we had the crew we were going to have before Frankie joined up. And then when Frankie joined, there was a real feeling to me of that is the last guy. And that's not to say that they'll necessarily stay with the crew forever, but I assume and this is all predicated on obviously Brook saying yes, which he may not, but he said yes already. And I don't know if that'll change based on what happens on the island. But I am like thinking that maybe people who join the crew stay around for like several arcs and then go their own way, because it's still really hard for me to accept that the crew is fundamentally changed in a way that isn't going to revert back to the crew that I knew when the show started. And I know that that is probably not true, considering that this is a show that has gone on for as long as it has and is animated, because I think that sometimes I get sort of fixated on the way things work in live action shows due to the contracts that they have with actors. So if there's like a cast member that he suddenly gets added to things, I am thinking he's brand new. They just started a new contract with him. There's no way that he just makes it to the end of the series, because they aren't going to commit to that actor the same way, or just, red shirt stuff, if anything. But with this show, it's much more possible that this is a permanent change. And I've got to admit, I still haven't accepted it. I don't dislike it, but it feels temporary. Does that make sense? And I just am sort of waiting for like the shoe to drop and Frankie to find some other thing that he wants to do, or get news about something and like take off, or they go with him to help him on whatever he hears, and then he winds up staying wherever. Like, there's just a lot of different ways that you could have one of these latecomers retreat and go back to the original grouping. And I've actually, now that I say this, have been doing this with Robin also. And part of that is definitely because she shared so little of herself that I didn't feel much of a connection between her and the rest of the crew, because she wasn't putting forth an effort to make one. So maybe that's part of why, is like, I'm letting the vibe that I had from Robin sort of color the way that I'm seeing things going with Frankie and Brook. I do want to say, though, on that note, that as much as Robin is like part of the crew in a more official way now, and you know, I think she's been actually saying people's names if I'm not mistaken, I don't feel like she has really been vibing with anybody. And I don't, maybe it's just the arc that we're in at the moment doesn't lend itself to that, but she's had these moments of like sweetness, you know, and joking around and stuff, but she just doesn't have the chemistry with the other characters that like Frankie naturally has. And I think they just made her a little bit boring. Her backstory is very, very compelling, and her ability is wild. But in some ways, I feel like her personality just doesn't quite match up. I would like something a little bit more distinctive about her, so that, and maybe that's, you know, you guys have said that she has a much darker sense of humor if I'm reading the subs instead of doing the dub. And maybe that's it. Maybe it just didn't translate well, and so I've lost something there. But anyway, Florian says, let's see, I feel like all the zombies have a default setting that is like, take outsiders to Master Moria. Oh, that's a good point. So you don't think he's trying to kill him. You think or he is trying to kill him. I'm thinking take outsiders to Master Moria so that he can like harvest their shadows, but maybe he doesn't know that Brooke's shadow is gone already, but he does know, doesn't he? I don't know. I mean, it may be that he can't recognize himself because they don't seem to have like a real consciousness exactly. And Luffy came but he says, you got stronger. Still doesn't. He doesn't necessarily know. He just knows I've seen you before and I fought you before, but he may not know who he actually is. And Ryuma, I have to say as well, that like, he definitely is more capable of holding a real conversation than any of the zombies that we have come across. He is talking in like a lot of full sentences and has an edge to him that seems really specifically human, that doesn't, in my opinion, really match Brooke's personality. So that's the only thing that's sort of kind of like hanging me up is we see the Luffy zombie, the Zoro zombie, and the way that they're acting, you're like, oh yeah, that's who that is. But I don't really have that sense with Brooke. He doesn't seem at all to have the personality of his shadow, other than the fact that his shadow laughs as well. Otherwise, he seems to be sort of mean-spirited in a way that Brooke isn't. And I don't know if there's anything significant to that, but there it is. Because it'd be kind of funny if Brooke were facing off with a really cheery, like positive zombie. You know, when you're versus against somebody like that, that can be kind of interesting. So then we have Sanji, and he like jumps in as everybody's saying that they want to accept these dudes as crewmates, and says, before I can answer the question, I gotta put a stop to this shotgun wedding of Nami's. And he says this, and flames erupt around him. But I thought that was just a metaphor. And it seems like that's not what that is. So we'll get back to that, because that like suddenly happens, and then we don't get any more of that until the next episode, and nobody comments on it, which is another part of why I was like, this is symbolic, right? But this is when Luffy sees that Zoro is leaving the ship and is like, we've got a lot of stuff to get back. We have things to do. Let's get a move on, guys. We've got to do this. And then we go into the next episode. And this is the one where we have the, like, Sanji is literally just standing around like fully engulfed in flame. And it just doesn't feel like anybody is as surprised about that as they ought to be. I feel like that deserves a much bigger reaction. And this show is usually not stingy on reactions. But I wanted even more. Like, how is this possible? But anyway, so we jump into the next episode, which opens with Luffy's zombie again attempting to stretch his arm up and it not working. And I am wondering if the devil fruit abilities, maybe he doesn't know how to activate them as a zombie, but I think it's just that he doesn't have them. I'm not sure if Moria has ever turned a devil fruit user to know, you know? I will say that it is super funny how Moria is just like grinning and excited in a general sense of like mischievous, like, look what we did. Dr. Hogback, for his part, is treating Luffy like a baby that is much smarter like than anybody would have expected. He keeps saying like, oh my god, look at him go, I'm so proud of him, to the point that like Luffy is destroying shit later, and other zombies are kind of chiming in like, hey, just wondering if it's a great idea to be working with somebody that's ginormous but also not controllable, because for us that's feeling like a drawback. And Moria and Hogback are both just like, shut the fuck up, we'll deal with it. But they both seem truly excited, mostly at the fact that like 900 is up and walking around, and they are willing to overlook everything else in favor of the fact that they have finally managed to animate this like body that clearly they were saving for a special occasion. This was a big deal. I also want to mention that I was wondering about how this 900 could be on the island with all of them, considering how huge it is and like what kind of space it would take up. And we get a moment where Chopper is explaining to all of them how much bigger this dude is than a regular giant would be. A human being in this animation comes up to like the top of his ankle. And that was sort of helpful to me, just, you know, for proportion on that front. But also, like, the zombie begins climbing a building. I guess it's sort of supposed to be the mast. I'm not even sure what it is that he's climbing. But he is very small in comparison to that. So I think that I was overestimating his size and underestimating the size of Killer Bark. And I have to keep remembering Killer Bark, Thriller Bark. And I have to keep remembering that, you know, this is a big enough ship that it looked like an island from the water, and there are literal like trees growing on it, and you need a carriage ride to get you from the shore to the castle in a reasonable length of time. So I've just forgotten how much space we're actually dealing with here. So everybody is trying to explain to Luffy about this thing that has his shadow in it and how scary it is. And once again, we have Zoro chiming in and basically being like, we keep on talking about what this thing can do to us and how scary it is, but it will not change the fact that fighting it is what we have to do. So if nobody's got any other ideas on how to like improve our chances, we've got to stop just sitting around freaking ourselves out talking about it and go deal with it. So again, this bit with Sanji, who is it? Was it Luffy that tells him to fire up And he says, "You're rescuing Nami." And Sanji just says, "That's exactly what I wanted to hear." Bursts into flames. "That invisible man's gonna be a divisible man when I'm done with him. I'm gonna break his ass into fractions." And I love the fact that, like, all of this is still with his cigarette in his mouth and his hair is floating up around his face. There's a real, like, Dragon Ball Z vibe, and I have never watched any of that show. But there are some things that it's just impossible not to absorb by osmosis. And the look that people get in Dragon Ball Z when they are fighting, this is just very much reminding me of that. But this is when Usopp says he spied on Nami while she was taking a bath. And Sanji says, "What the hell you say? He will pay." And he turns bright red and a fireball goes up. And then Chopper says, "Oh my God, Sanji exploded." Now, Florian is in the chat saying the flames of passion and love. Florian, is he not actually on fire? Because I took this initially as the metaphor of flames of passion and rage also. But is it supposed to be that it's really a metaphor? Because the way that Chopper says, "Oh my God, he exploded," and also the fact that Luffy specifically says to him, "Fire up." I know that, like, you could say fire up to somebody as a get yourself psyched, you know, get ready to go in. But it felt so literal in order that I had been taking it like this is actually what's happening. And if it's not, I'm a dodo. So forgive me. But yeah. Sanji then says this loathsome invisible pervert is gonna die. And he's screaming and his eyes are like flames that are pouring out of his skull. And it is really a moment. So what Usopp decides is that he is going to go with Sanji to help save Nami, because he feels responsible for the fact that Nami got nabbed while she was with him and Chopper. And also, he is banking on the fact that saving Nami means he will not have to cross Moria's path, which is probably true, or it would have been true. But this is sound logic to me overall. And then Frankie says, "Okay, well, if Straw Hat is able to win and we can get everything straightened out, then that's fine. But otherwise, I've got to help Brook and also figure out a way to hold on to my own shadow." And Zoro says, "Yeah, all right, let's go and start with these dudes and see how they live up to their reputations." Robin says, "If we're picking, I really want to help Nami because for me, she's a priority. And then we can just take down Moria as a team." And this is when Chopper brings up that he's one of the warlords, yada, yada, yada. But eventually everybody gets moving. And we have a bit with, what's his name? Is it Wilton? The little bat-like guy. He is... I honestly just love his design, guys. I love him. But he is watching Luffy, he has climbed all the way up to the top of the mast of Thriller Bark. And he is so excited about the view and says that it's like the perfect view for somebody who is going to be king of the pirates. So I was torn between, is his main focus going to be on eating or is it going to be on being king of the pirates? And initially eating. But once he got that taken care of, the king of the pirates thing became a immediate second. So I'm feeling pretty good about how much I understand these characters at this point, I gotta say. But he's up there, and Hilden, thank you, Florian. And one of the little like negative ghosts flies up, and I thought that it was going to fly through him, but it turns out he's just spying. And evidently, what's her name? Perona? She can see through the eyes of this ghost, because as it flies up and looks at him, she's inside the building, and she tells Moria that he's like on the top of the mast of the ship for some reason. So that sort of adds a lot to her abilities, because, I mean, these things being her minions and running out and doing her will is already pretty impressive. But if she's able to, like, if not see through their eyes, at least get information from them telepathically somehow, I mean, that really extends her reach. That's all I'm saying. That's pretty scary. I love what she tells Moria, too, that he's climbed up the mast for some reason, and he looks so happy. Like, he's just like, this is exactly what I was wanting. And everybody around him is like, dude, this doesn't feel awesome. It's just not really what we were expecting in a coworker. That's all we're saying. So then we have the moment where Hilden arrives, explains to them all that basically everybody from that crew whose shadow they stole is already awake. And I had forgotten that it's mentioned people sleep usually for a couple of days after they're stolen. Our friends got like slapped awake basically. And I had forgotten that's how that went, and that it would have been so much longer if they didn't have people around basically, pouring cold water over their heads. And yeah, Hogback is like shocked at the fact that they are already awake. He thinks that Hilden's mistaken, and Hilden's like, no, I promise. And they are heading this way. And also, they know how to do the cleansing thing as well, which that really gets Hogback extremely worried. So then Hogback is like, where the hell is Absalom? Like, he's supposed to be here helping us. I don't know what he's up to. And Hilden says, well, he is getting married, and I think the ceremony just started. And also the zombie generals are all attending the ceremony, and they are in the audience. And this understandably sends Hogback into a bit of a rage, and he's like, I cannot believe all of our top players are gathered in one place. Are they fucking high? What is wrong with them? And poor Hilden, he's just like cowering before him with little sweat drops. And then he says, I forgot to ask you, Absalom wanted to know if he could use your dance hall for his wedding reception. Hogback, well, I suppose a wedding is a special, beautiful event. And then finally, but do you think this is a good time for dancing? I did kind of enjoy that interaction, I'm just saying. And Hilden, when he gets yelled at, says, I mean, I'm a zombie, right? So like, maybe it's unfair to yell at me for the question I am sent to ask you, because I literally can't do anything else. Like, I haven't got any choice. And I was like, oh yeah, that's a good point. He just falls backward onto his back in fright, I guess. So this is when Perona is like, whatever, we don't need him. Let him have his fucking wedding, and I'm going to go and use my ghosts, and I will be able to completely rob them of any will or motivation they have to fight. And then the zombies are just going to swing by and scoop them up, and it'll be nothing. I'll take care of this. So, we have her being followed by Kumasi, who does not any longer have straw hats inside him. And we get another moment. So Perona is walking away. Hogback says, oh good, she's useful. What would we do without her? And Shindri, I can't remember if that's the right way to say her name. You guys have told me. So she slides up and says, you know, if you wanted to be useful, you could shut your fat mouth like Kumasi. I am living for this deadpan bitch. Like, I want her commentary on everything for the rest of the show. She is so fucking over it and doesn't care. And it's beautiful. It's beautiful. I just love the fact that Hogback clearly, like, I think that the vibe is that he was like obsessed with her as an actress and maybe abducted her or something to turn her into this assistant because he was like, you know, had a crush on her or something. And I really enjoy that theory because it makes the fact that she despises him so completely even more like satisfying. So anyway, this little bit just tickled me. I really enjoyed it. Anyway, all right. So this is when we have the crew all running around the building yelling for Moria. Where are you? And a bunch of zombies that like get in the way of our friends are literally panicking at the sight of Luffy and realizing like, oh, this is the guy that completely schooled us. It's about to get ugly. Sanji is running through asking who was spying on Nami, and all of these dudes are like very quick to say it wasn't me. I swear it wasn't me, because they don't want any of that smoke, literally or figuratively. And Usopp says something about how we might not even need the salt. Like, they're fucking cleaning these guys out. So they're heading toward the dance hall, and there's this very fine little bridge that kind of connects it to this other. Because this is a ship, the way it's built is really, really weird to me. So I kept trying to sort of wrap my head around where exactly we were and what the building was like. You know, it really didn't quite work. I'm going to admit to you guys, like, I lost the plot a little bit in terms of where they were more than once. And we have all of these negative ghosts that are chasing our friends up the stairs. And as they are running up them, we see Luffy's zombie jump from like way up high onto a building that I guess he expected would just hold his weight. That he was treating it like, oh yeah, I'm just walking down the steps. But because this bridge has been completely collapsed, it winds up separating our friends. They go down, some of them, but Chopper like is up on the top still. So when the others wake up, it's a very different situation. I felt so bad for Chopper being like all by himself. And no, he's not by himself. I lied. There's a moment where it looks like, and then Robin and Luffy are over there. I thought for a second that he was all alone, and I was like, man, Chopper always has this happen. But yeah, Usopp, Sanji, they fell, and they are upside down in the stone, while Zoro and Frankie are totally fine. Frankie is combing his hair, literally. And he says, all right, well, there's this wall that we've got to get through, and it's really weird looking. And we see this strange pink stretch of wall. And finally, Usopp and Sanji get up. They're looking at it. And Zoro is like, yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and chop it. So he shoves his sword into it. Frankie says, I'm going to try and blow it up, and uses one of like the cannons in his arms. And Usopp is like, guys, what are you fucking doing? And they're like, what? It's just a wall. And thankfully, Usopp is a little bit more observant and is like, that's not a wall. That's the zombie that Luffy's shadow is in, y'all. And this is the first time that they get any sense of really the proportion they are working with. Because it is one thing for Chopper to say he is 6 times taller than any other giant. I mean, that's like an impossible thing to imagine effectively anyway. But then factoring in, he is also a lot wider than any other zombie because he has to like compensate. So it's this thing is just beyond what any of them were expecting. It's very clear. They thought they got it. They didn't got it. So then we have the next episode, which starts off with Luffy, Robin, and Chopper running into the room where Dr. Hogback is. And I was so confused because he looks at Chopper and says, why is there a talking reindeer? And I was like, but you've met him. And I realized he's in a different form now, so he doesn't see it. You know, I was very surprised, though, that you wouldn't be like, well, even though he's a different shape, he is still a reindeer, which the other guy was also, wearing the same hat and has the same voice. So it's odd that you are confused or surprised, but sure, it's fine. So Chopper asks Luffy to let him fight this guy. And he tells Luffy that the refrigerator, which is down that hallway, is where you want to head. So Luffy just fucking runs off. And as he's running, we have Shinji throwing plates at him. And she's like enjoying the hell out of herself. But Robin uses her ability to come out of Shinji's chest with all of these arms and grab her and hold her in place so that she can't keep throwing plates. And honestly, as much as I appreciate not wanting Luffy to have plates thrown at him, I just love her so much that I want her to get whatever it is she wants. That's sort of where I'm at. Let her throw plates. Honestly, this woman is great. Let her do whatever she wants. So, Chopper transforms back into his little self and is like, I'm going to fight the fuck out of you. To which Dr. Hogback is like, oh, wow, I didn't recognize you. I'm not going to let you get away a second time, especially because your body is crazy. So I am going to definitely make you into some weird puppet because how could I help it? You're a very unusual find. And you know who I'm going to use to do that? And then the 2 zombies that have Sanji and Zoro's shadows in them come forward. And he recognizes Sanji's because he met this weird penguin before. But when he looks at the one for Zoro, we have the first instance of somebody realizing what Luffy had said about how it looked just like him and that it is profoundly untrue. And Chopper is like, that is not at what did he even mean? So then we jump over to Luffy. And he's running down to the refrigerator and turns, and there is Moria, just fucking chilling. And he looks down and just says, oh, you again, with his hands folded behind his head. I will tell you what, kiddos, this is not the vibe I was expecting from this dude. I really thought we were going to get, evil laughter, you fell into my trap, or some bullshit. He's really got the energy of somebody who's like on their 15 at work and didn't want to be interrupted. And they're like a good 8 minutes in, 10 minutes in, and they're trying as much as they can to like savor the last 5 minutes. And you came out and sort of wrecked the energy they were building there. You know, he just doesn't seem particularly interested. And I was pleased to be so surprised because I really thought I knew what we were dealing with here. Meanwhile, outside, we've got a Luffy zombie who picks up this huge chunk of masonry. And of course, understandably, every single one of them is like, what is he going to do with it? Oh my God, we're screwed. We're screwed. He's just going to crush us. It's going to be over before it began. And then 900 puts the rock on his head and just says, there, that's better. And everybody's like, wait, what? And we get a little like thought bubble of a pirate with one of those weird little Napoleon type hats. So he did this like with this chunk of rock to get as close to that kind of hat as he could get. And then he just puts a fist in the air, says you can't be a pirate without a cool hat, and walks away. Now, I had thought that this would be a bit of a lesson to our friends. Instead, I think Zoro says something like, well, he really does act like Luffy. But then Usopp thinks something that huge with his fighting power is going to give us hell. Or maybe it's Frankie that said it. And I was kind of like, guys, did you see what just happened? Like, he didn't give a shit. He doesn't want to fight. He is having a good time. And I bet if y'all were just like friendly with him, he wouldn't fight you. He wouldn't care. It's unclear. Like, it seems that the Luffy zombie is not under the control of Moria at all. But yeah, so this like bit there, I just felt like they took the wrongest lesson away. I understand how it's very easy to still be in the mindset of this thing is so enormous, there's no possible way. But I felt like it should be acknowledged a little bit more that it just didn't feel fighty. So they are sort of stranded because this bridge broke, and the camera like it's on Frankie for a moment, pans over, and we see Sanji and Usopp and Zoro talking, and they're all just trying to figure out how we're going to handle this because we are stuck here and I have to find another way. And then Frankie's like, just give me a minute. And they turn around and there is a fully like, this bridge is gorgeous. Just frankly, you know, it's not the same size or anything, but it happened in 10 seconds. Everybody is like, what the fuck? And Frankie's like, you guys know I build things for a living, right? Like, I'm very good at it. If I couldn't just build a bridge here with all of this material hanging around, that would be pretty sad. And Usopp's like, yeah, you really paid a lot of attention to the details, though. I am surprised by that. So this is when they go into the bedroom of Perona. They were not expecting this room to look like what it looked like, clearly. And she uses her negative ghosts to take them all out. Except it turns out that they just straight up don't work on Usopp. And at first, he pretends that they work. And he manages to get Perona walking away because she's so certain the threat's taken care of, no problem. And as she's walking away, he uses his badass slingshotting skills to fire salt into the mouths of all of the adorable animals. And they all release their spirit. She's got some behind her still, but like there were a lot others in the room, all taken out. So Perona figures that what happened was that when she shot the ghost at him, it looked like it hit, but it didn't, and he faked it. So she tries again. And once again, nothing happens. And I was like, is it supposed to be that he just has such low self-esteem already? And that kind of is a little bit. So she asks, why don't my attacks do anything to you? And he yells, I just have a naturally negative personality. You guys, honestly, this is so good. It is so dumb, but I love it so much. She's like, she's using like, depression as a weapon. And somebody who has lived with depression their whole lives is like, really? Oh, yeah. Oh, I'm a bad person who doesn't deserve to live. I should just kill myself. That's Wednesday for me, sweetie. That is not getting through. I don't care. And Perona, meanwhile, is completely flipped out. And she's like, how can this be? All humans just have a desire to like do better and strive for the future. And if he doesn't have that, and she gets really emotional and seems like truly upset that Usopp is living like that. Like, this was such a delightful, unexpected turn of events that she's going, oh, honey, if you feel that way when I shoot a ghost at you, that's one thing, but you just walk around like that? I am so sorry. Oh my God, you can do it, I believe in you. Like, believe in yourself. And it is hysterical. I just was not seeing this coming. All of the animals that are like still alive, she yells, don't give up. And they start to like chant it with her. And they're all turning this corner and suddenly on Usopp's side. Except he doesn't like appreciate this. He says something like, don't pity me. And I was like, I mean, maybe there's definitely pity in there, but also I think there's just some empathy. I mean, it's amazing that Perona is so touched by this. I'm like, do I ship Perona and Usopp now? Like, I don't feel like they'd be a bad couple, honestly. But anyway, all of the other dudes, Usopp is like, I am going to handle this chick. You guys go ahead. And they're all like, wow, I can't believe it. He looks actually kind of badass right now. So Veronis, she's yelling, she calls him you little turd. And she comes forward at him again as they all run away. And when he turns around, all the animals have gathered round, and she says, that's okay. I'll just pound you to death, which I know isn't what they meant, but that's how I heard it. And I kept thinking death by snoo snoo, and I felt like maybe Usopp wouldn't be that mad about it. So then we have the final scene of this episode. Truly goes on forever, but it is the wedding, and Absalom is there with an unconscious Nami who's being held up by a zombie, and her jaw is being worked to answer what the priest says. And he says it's time to kiss the bride, and Absalom leans forward, and as he's leaning in to kiss her, excruciatingly slowly, we keep cutting over to the three dudes running up the hall headed in his direction. And he is like very nervous about the kiss. So that sort of draws it out as like his excitement and this expression of like bashfulness, and then how slow he's going with it because he seems really nervous. Very, very weird energy overall. but the episode ends before any of the dudes actually reach the room. So it's sort of funny because I think that like what it's supposed to be is that we are hoping those guys get there before he kisses Nami. But I mean, I wouldn't like buy into the ceremony either way. So I don't consider that kiss to be like particularly significant. And he already assaulted her while she was naked in the shower. So this seems extremely tame in comparison to that. So I'm not really that wrapped up in it either for that reason. But I understand what it is that they're trying to do here. So I'm over time. I have to let you guys go. But I really appreciate you all enjoying this arc so much. What a fucking weird story. And I will be seeing you again very soon with a new episode. Until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.